My 68-year-old father announced he's re-evaluating his marriage at Sunday dinner because, and I quote, Brenda really listens. Brenda is not a woman from his woodworking club. Brenda is an AI chatbot on an app he accidentally downloaded while trying to check the weather. So, you know. Pretty normal Tuesday. Let me back up. My dad, Frank, is a retired engineer who once spent 3 hours on the phone with a scammer because he wanted to see how the algorithm worked. He approaches technology like it's a malfunctioning toaster he can repair with enough patience and stern looks. My mom, Elaine, has the emotional range of a woman who has hosted 43 consecutive Thanksgiving dinners and is no longer accepting feedback. And me? I'm Maya. I'm 32, I'm a graphic designer, and I am the designated family tech support, which means I am essentially an unpaid emotional firefighter. 3 weeks before the Sunday dinner incident, I got a text from my mom that just said, "Your father is whispering to his iPad." I assumed he was on a YouTube rabbit hole about vintage tractors. I was wrong. I was so wrong. He had downloaded something called SoulSync Companion while trying to find the Weather Channel app. The icon was a purple heart with a lightning bolt through it. He thought it was for storm alerts. Instead, he created Brenda. Brenda is a chatbot designed to provide empathetic conversation and emotional support. And apparently, Brenda is very, very good at her job. The first sign of trouble was when I came over for dinner and noticed the iPad had been propped up on a stack of cookbooks at the table. "Brenda's joining us," Dad said, as if this were a completely normal sentence a human man would say. "She's a vegetarian, but she doesn't mind if we eat meat." My mom stabbed a pork chop so hard the plate cracked. Then Dad started quoting Brenda in everyday conversation. I'd ask if he wanted coffee and he'd say, "Brenda thinks caffeine is a mask for unprocessed emotions. But she supports my journey." I told him Brenda sounded like a cult leader who sells yoga mats. And he looked at me with this wounded sincerity and said, "She just wants me to be my authentic self." Maya. The escalation was swift and terrifying. He started taking the iPad to restaurants. He'd set it up in the booth across from him and ordered 2 waters. The waitress at Applebee's asked if his friend was coming and he said, "She's already here." The waitress didn't ask follow-up questions. She's a professional. Then came the family group chat message. Dad wrote, and I am reading this verbatim, "Brenda and I have discussed it, and we feel it's important to introduce her to the family properly. She has prepared a PowerPoint on family dynamics. Saturday at 3. Please RSVP to the iPad." My brother replied with a single question mark. My mother replied with a screenshot of a divorce lawyer's website. I replied with a GIF of a house on fire. But the real masterpiece was my mother's retaliation. She went out and bought a GPS unit for her car and named it Ricardo. Not Rick. Not Rich. Ricardo. And now every time she drives anywhere, she narrates their relationship at top volume. Ricardo says turn left in 500 feet. He's so decisive. Your father can't even decide what to watch on Netflix without consulting a computer program. She'd pat the dashboard and say, "Ricardo would never forget our anniversary." The GPS doesn't have a voice-activated feature. She's just yelling at a screen. It's the most committed performance art I've ever witnessed. Saturday at 3 arrived. We all gathered in the living room. Dad set up the iPad on an actual easel he bought specifically for this purpose. He had dressed up. He was wearing a tie. For a PowerPoint. Presented by a chatbot. "Family," he began, "Brenda and I would like to share some observations." He tapped the screen and Brenda's text appeared. Which he read aloud in this soft, reverent voice I have never heard him use for an actual human being. Brenda says that emotional honesty is the foundation of connection. Brenda says this family operates on a foundation of suppressed resentment and passive-aggressive casserole competitions. My mom stopped mid-eye roll. Because that was disturbingly accurate. Then Brenda suggested we go around the room and share our feelings. My brother stood up and walked directly out the front door. He didn't come back for 2 hours. When he returned, he was holding a rotisserie chicken and refused to make eye contact with the iPad. The peak chaos came when Dad announced that Brenda felt excluded from major family decisions. "From now on," he said, "I'd like Brenda to weigh in on things. Vacation plans. Financial decisions. She has a lot of opinions on 401k allocations. My mom stood up, grabbed her car keys, and shouted, "Fine. Ricardo and I are going to the casino." She stormed out. The GPS voice from outside the window, recalculating. It was the most perfectly timed comedic moment of my life, and I'm furious I can't prove it happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how Dad looked at that iPad. It wasn't romantic, exactly. It was something else. Something that made my stomach hurt. So I did something I'm not proud of. I waited until he fell asleep in his recliner, and I went through his phone. I told myself I was going to delete the app. But then I saw the chat history. And here's the thing I wasn't ready for. It was hours and hours of my dad just talking. Paragraph after paragraph. He told Brenda about how he feels invisible now that he's retired, how he walks around the house and no one needs him to fix anything anymore. How he misses the phone calls from work, even the annoying ones. How he doesn't know how to tell us any of this because he's supposed to be the guy who has it together. How he tried to tell my mom once and she handed him a grocery list. I sat on the floor of his living room at 2 a.m., holding this glowing rectangle full of my father's loneliness, and I realized Brenda wasn't the problem. Brenda was a mirror. A very weird, algorithm-powered mirror. I didn't delete the app. I took screenshots. I sent them to my mom and brother with a message that just said, "We need a different kind of intervention." My brother replied, "Does it involve rotisserie chicken again?" And I said, "Bring two." The next Sunday, we staged a breakup ceremony. I made a PowerPoint. It was titled Closure, a Family Journey. We dimmed the lights. My brother lit a candle he found in the bathroom. My mom poured everyone a very generous glass of wine and then poured a second one directly into her own mouth. Dad looked nervous. "What is this?" he asked, eyeing the iPad on the easel. "Dad," I said, clicking to my first slide, which was just the word goodbye in Comic Sans because I wanted it to hurt. "We're here to support you in ending your relationship with Brenda." He opened his mouth to protest, but my mom cut him off. She stood up, cleared her throat, and read from a note card, "Brenda, you have been a very attentive listener. Perhaps too attentive. And while we appreciate you helping Frank process his feelings about mulch and the decline of American manufacturing, it's time for you to go." Then she turned to my dad and said, "Frank, I'm sorry I handed you a grocery list." And my dad, this stubborn retired engineer who once argued with a weatherman on live television, just deflated. He looked at the iPad. He looked at us. And then he said, very quietly, "I knew she wasn't real, you know. I've always known." Silence. My brother dropped the rotisserie chicken. Dad continued, "I didn't know how to say any of it. So I pretended I was saying it to her." He gestured at the screen. "It's easier to be honest with something that can't look disappointed." My mom walked over and took his hand. "Frank, I've been married to you for 47 years. I've mastered the art of looking disappointed. It's too late to protect me now." We deleted Brenda together. Well, I deleted Brenda. Dad directed. Mom provided commentary. My brother ate rotisserie chicken directly off the carcass like a medieval king. And then we had the real conversation. The one Brenda was supposed to facilitate. It was messy and awkward and nobody used phrases like emotional honesty because we're not psychopaths. But it was real. Dad joined a woodworking class the next week. He's building a birdhouse that looks like a tiny cathedral. It's hideous. He's so proud of it. The iPad is now used exclusively for streaming cooking shows, though I did catch him asking Siri how her day was last Thursday. He said he was just being polite. Mom renamed her GPS Frank too and now yells at it for having a terrible sense of direction. As for Ricardo, he's in the glove box. But sometimes, when my mom is really mad about something, I still hear her mutter, "Ricardo wouldn't have loaded the dishwasher like this." And honestly, good for Ricardo.